In the heart of the Hague, Netherlands, the museum Mauritshuis displays some of the world's most iconic art in its royal cabinet of paintings. I'm no art history major, but even I recognize some of these works, including ones from Rembrandt and Vermeer's Girl with a Pearl Earring. But there's another oil painting by Vermeer that's also quite famous, called View of Delft. It's of his hometown, and he created it around 1660. The painting is a cityscape, the only one Vermeer ever painted, a snapshot of the Dutch city of Delft from across the Schie River. In it, you see the city's beautiful architecture on full display, including buildings with striking red roofs. Well, at least they used to be red. Today, they have a pinkish hue, and if you looked at the painting up close, you'd see that they are covered in white spots.
You're getting sort of a fairly decently sized lump of whitish grayish material that really sort of grows in one of those paint layers, and it pushes away everything on its sides like an erupting volcano.
And now researchers know these erupting volcanoes all over Vermeer's painting are soap. Welcome to Tiny Matters, a science podcast about the little things that have a big impact on our society, past and present. I'm Sam Jones, and I'm joined by my co-host, Deboki Chakravarti.
Today's reporting comes from science writer and chemist Anne Hilden, who you've heard on Tiny Matters in the past. When Anne came to us with the topic of soap, I did kind of think at first, well, how much is there to say about soap?
Right.
It's just one of those things I take for granted, unless I've been cooking something super, super messy, or I've spent all day traveling, or my son has been playing outside in the mud. Most of the time, though,
Not thinking about it.
it's just not something I think about it.
Yeah, totally. But it turns out soap is fascinating and not at all boring or basic.
Metaphorically, it's not basic. Literally, it is actually basic. It has a pH of around 9.
That's very true.
That's the kind of humor you can get from Tiny Matters. So today we're going to talk about the weird chemistry of soap, what ancient soap was like, and why scientists are finding soap in old oil paintings. And we'll hear a lot more from Jeroen Hermans, a professor of conservation science at the University of Amsterdam, who you just heard a minute ago. But first, if you had to guess, where in the timeline of human history would you put the invention of soap? Maybe the Middle Ages or the Islamic Golden Age, or maybe you'd go back a couple thousand years to early imperial China. Well, you might be surprised, I know I was, to learn that soap is actually over 4,000 years old.
That is old.
Sure is.
The earliest written record we have of soap is on a clay tablet from about 2200 BCE in Mesopotamia.
That's Christine Konkel, an assistant professor at Albany State University, where she teaches both forensic science and chemistry. It's kind of a dream teaching lineup, honestly.
Sam's quitting the pod.
Yeah.
And it gives an economic account of cloth manufacture, where a substance made up of 1 kwa, about 1 liter of oil, and 5.5 kwa, or about 5.5 liters of potash, is used to degrease and clean the cloth. So that is the earliest reputable written record we have of soap being used or soap being produced.
If you're like me and didn't remember what potash was, it's a salt also known as potassium carbonate. Today, we typically get potassium carbonate from a manufacturing process that starts with a potassium mineral and carbon dioxide. But where would ancient Mesopotamians get their potash?
So when we burn any plant material, the ash that's left over is primarily carbonate salts.
That's Seth Rasmussen, a professor of chemistry at North Dakota State University. Seth was Christine's graduate advisor.
The type of plant that you're burning depends upon whether that's more rich in sodium carbonate or more rich in potassium carbonate. So things that are grown in salty soil or near the ocean typically are very high in sodium carbonate, and so that's our soda. If you burn inland plants, particularly trees, what you get is primarily potassium carbonate, so that's potash.
Okay, so we have soda from ocean plants and potash from inland plants. And to make soap, you can mix either of those with oil. Here's Christine again.
Anything that's a fat or an oil that has triglycerides in it, you can make soap from it.
Triglycerides are molecules made up of fatty acids. When they react with a base, like potash, the bonds in the triglyceride are broken, and you get negatively charged fatty acids floating around. They'll then glom on to positively charged ions, like the sodium in soda or the potassium in potash, forming fatty acid salts, what we call soap. And the positive ion that gets involved can really change the properties of that soap.
For example, sodium is a smaller ionic size, and it actually makes hard soaps. And potassium is a slightly larger ionic size, and it will make soaps that are more soft in consistency. So sodium palmitate is a hard soap, and potassium palmitate is a soft soap. And then if we move over to the alkaline earth metals, such as calcium, they can make insoluble soaps.
Insoluble soaps is a bit of a tongue twister, and we're going to get back to it in a couple minutes. But the soap that we use to clean things can't be insoluble. It has to dissolve in water. Sodium and potassium are good at that, and the soap's fatty acids are what attract dirt and grease, removing them from the surface that's being cleaned.
All of these very early soaps were not the solid soaps that we think about in terms of modern soap. You would essentially have your oil and aqueous solution of your soda or potash. You would mix that together, heat it, and you would be left with a liquid solution, which was now a soap.
There's also the possibility, although we cannot say definitively for sure when it started, that soaps were made unintentionally. So I could clean out something containing animal fats, and I use some plant ash. Plant ash contains alkali, and I could make soap, a saponification in that process. So, and I'm not intentionally making soap. I may be unintentionally making soap, but it's still cleaning.
It's very possible that ancient people discovered that if they used ashes to scrub their pots, the pot got clean more easily. But there are no written records that say this is how soap making started, so it's an educated guess. And unfortunately, archaeological evidence won't help us confirm or disprove the hypothesis.
In some cases, as we mentioned earlier, we can use archaeological chemistry to look at things before the written record. The problem is that soap is biodegradable, and so soap does not hang around, and so we don't have any samples of soap from the Mesopotamian era that we can actually analyze.
Unlike like glass or ceramics.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that maybe soap was not being formed in other places. It's just that they have the best written accounts.
And Christine would know if there were other written accounts as ancient as those from Mesopotamia. She read every available primary source while writing a book chapter about soap making in antiquity.
It's a lot of sources, I think.
She took on the project while she was a grad student in Seth's lab. Although Seth is a chemist and not a historian by training, he had gotten into the habit of doing deep research on the history of different materials to enrich his teaching, which led to him designing an entire college course on the history of chemistry and writing several books.
The way that I view doing a lot of historical research is imagine that you are doing the mother of all review articles. And so you're collecting as much information as you can, and then you're trying to make a cohesive story out of that.
One of the issues with history research is there's a lot of bad history research out there. People do not look through the primary literature. And another difficulty with chemical history is a lot of it is not in English. We're talking about things that were written 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, and we don't know anyone that speaks Sumerian. So you are reliant on someone else's translation of what it says, and hopefully it was translated correctly.
Christine has continued her research on the history of soap making into the Middle Ages, when the techniques developed into making the kind of solid, bar-shaped soap we're familiar with today. This is the time period when we first see soap making recognized as a profession.
Soap making still has strong cultural importance in the Middle East, where traditional techniques are passed through families. In 2024, UNESCO added the making of Aleppo soap in Syria and Nabulsi soap in Palestine to its representative list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity, which was created to preserve things like oral traditions, social practices, and rituals.
I like to incorporate history into my teaching so that you can provide a richness. And then if we did not have the chemistry background we did, we would not be nearly as good of chemical historians because we're looking at it through the eyes of the chemist and trying to add that chemical perspective. Oh, we know if we add this and that, this is what's forming.
More on that in a moment. If you like Tiny Matters, I know you'll love This Guy Sucked from the Multitude Podcast Collective. This Guy Sucked is a history podcast for haters by haters. Join historian Dr. Claire Aubin and a new expert every week to pull back the scholarly curtain on some of the world's biggest bummers. No dead person is safe, and the show's guests prove that the best part of understanding the past is criticizing it. I super enjoyed the recent episode on Roger Taney, who was a Supreme Court justice in the 1800s, and he authored the definitively racist Dred Scott versus Sanford decision, which basically said that African American people were not citizens. So, yeah, he's a really good one to hate on. Subscribe to This Guy Sucked in your podcast app now. That's This Guy Sucked from the Multitude Podcast Collective. New episodes every Thursday, wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, back to the show. We love to incorporate history too, as all of our listeners know, but also, let's revisit that last point that Christine made. Mixing chemistry with other fields of research not only elevates that research, but also the chemistry. It gives it additional importance and meaning. And so on that note, we chatted with Jen Bayline, who is a professor of chemistry at Washington and Jefferson College. She uses her chemical perspective to illuminate cultural heritage in her courses.
Right now, I'm working on artisanal chemistry, where we are using chemistry to explain the science behind different kinds of artisanal craftsmanship that are done in different countries and cultures. We go over fragrance chemistry, how you extract the essence of a flower and turn it into a perfume. Then we also look at color chemistry, thinking about fabric dyes and pigments, and like using those pigments to also make paint, homemade paint. We also do a bit of food chemistry where we talk about freezing point depression with making ice cream or boiling point elevation with making candy. We also do paper making, glass making. These are all things where you're transforming materials into new compounds. There's a chemical change or a physical change. And so chemistry explains a lot of the art materials that people use throughout the world.
And I bet you can guess what Jen has her students do with their fragrance extracts.
I will have students make soap. It's also a chemistry reaction because you take oil and you combine it with sodium hydroxide. And when I say oil, I mean it could be anything from peanut butter to olive oil to almond oil.
Sodium hydroxide, also known as lye, is a stronger base than the sodium or potassium carbonate we talked about before. So it's more effective than the old-fashioned method of soaking ashes in water. But sodium hydroxide can also cause chemical burns, so you need to be careful about how much lye you put in your soap formula.
You can go online and you look at these lye calculators where you input the type of oil and the amount of oil that you want to use, and it will just spit out a number and say, okay, this is how much sodium hydroxide you need to measure out to make your soap. Well, that's kind of a bit of a black box, like where does that number even come from? And it has to do with saponification value.
The saponification value is the number of milligrams of base, in this case sodium hydroxide, that you need to react or saponify a gram of fat or oil into soap.
So Jen is designing an experiment where students can determine the saponification values for their own oils and test their soap after it's made. Things like checking the pH to make sure it's not too alkaline, or measuring how much Vaseline it can clean off a piece of yarn. Students can also test how well the soap lathers and observe the difference in lathering between hard and soft water.
Hard water has calcium and magnesium ions in it, and the soap molecules will react. They'll bind with that calcium and magnesium metal and precipitate out, become a solid, which is the soap scum that you see.
Remember the whole insoluble soap thing that we mentioned earlier? Some salts dissolve in water and some do not, depending on the combination of ions. When the fatty acid ions in soap meet the calcium and magnesium ions in hard water, they form the insoluble, crusty-looking solid that makes those gross rings around the bathtub, which is also why soap doesn't lather as well in hard water. But Jen told us there's an easy fix.
One test you can do is you can add a chelating agent. So that's a chemical that will kind of swoop in and bind with the calcium and magnesium and say, okay, I'm going to take you up. I'm going to take you out of the action. And then the soap can do its thing and like make nice bubbles and lather and all that.
A common chelating agent that you'll see in personal care products is EDTA, which stands for ethylene diamine tetraacetic acid. EDTA binds to calcium and magnesium ions, and more importantly, binds to those ions better than fatty acids in soap can. So if you add EDTA to hard water, it'll keep the fatty acids from mixing with the minerals in there, and you end up with less soap scum.
But insoluble soap doesn't stop at your bathtub. Our last guest for today is Yoon Hermans, who you heard at the top of the episode. His training is in chemistry, but his research now is focused on art conservation. Yoon uses chemical methods to try to understand oil paint at the molecular scale, including how it changes over time. These changes can include the appearance of insoluble soaps through a slow chemical reaction, which can happen when the pigments in the paint release metal ions. Some pigments do this more easily than others. The one Yoon has studied a lot is zinc white,
which is a white pigment used a lot in the Impressionist time. And that's just not super stable in the presence of acids. It tends to dissolve a little bit and release these zinc ions. But there's other pigments that can do this as well. Many lead pigments can release lead. So that's one half. And the other half of the story is the fatty acids. Those can be released by the oil binder itself. So the binder in an oil paint is an oil. It's the vegetable oil. So that's a triglyceride molecule. And over time, under the right conditions, these bonds in these triglycerides can be broken. And then you start to get a slow release of fatty acids as well. And how fast that goes really depends on the conditions and the exact composition of the paint.
For example, humidity is one condition that increases the release of fatty acids, and having pigments around that are a bit alkaline can speed up saponification even more. And if insoluble soaps build up in the paint, they can affect a painting in different ways. Remember that Vermeer painting View of Delft and all of those little white dots, or as Yoon put it, erupting volcanoes? That's in fact lead soap forming when lead from the paint mixes with the fatty acids Yoon just mentioned.
It has made an otherwise red roof look pink because there's just so many white spots on it. So that has a pretty striking difference, and it makes the whole surface look gritty. And so that's just getting in the way of appreciating the painting, you could say.
But it's not just lead soaps that form on paintings. Zinc soaps can also form.
The formation of zinc soaps is related to extreme brittleness of a paint, which means it cannot handle stress very well and it tends to start to crack. And it has a tendency to lose adhesion with whatever it's painted on. So you get what we call delamination, which just means that this paint layer might be released from whatever it's painted on. And if you then also have a crack, it means that you risk losing the paint altogether, that it just flakes off and ends up on the floor.
In unfortunate cases like these, a painting often ends up laid flat in a drawer to prevent it from losing more paint. Yoon, who also has a small position working at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam and teaches chemistry to art conservators, has opinions on that.
I would argue that we shouldn't aim to keep everything looking pristine. I always think that sort of the material history of an art object or a cultural heritage object in general is a very interesting part of the story. So to give you an example from the Rijksmuseum, one of the most famous paintings in the collection there is the Night Watch. It's this giant painting by Rembrandt. It's like 3.5 by 4.5 meters. It's huge and it has a very central position in the museum and everyone goes to see it. That painting has been through a lot. Like, it's been attacked with acid by a visitor. It's had a knife attack, so it has big knife slices in there that have been carefully stitched back together. In the Second World War, it's been taken off its frame, rolled up and put in a salt mine in the south of the country to protect it from German occupation and make sure it wasn't carted off back to Germany. And all of these parts of its history have left their traces, but that tells part of the story of where that painting has been and the importance it has for Dutch people, and because they really wanted to protect that painting.
Jen Bayline, who we heard from earlier, has also taught classes on art conservation.
A lot of art is tangible. You can touch it. Well, don't touch it. You'll get in trouble. But it's made of some kind of material. And as soon as you say the word material, you're talking chemistry, because that material will undergo reactions or physical changes over time. Power of chemistry is you can use chemistry to understand how things are happening in arts, whether it's soap making or like fabric dye. And so it's less magical. And instead you understand why this little change impacts your outcome.
We can imagine how ancient humans started doing things a certain way, like mixing ash water and oil, just because they knew it worked, even though they couldn't explain how it worked. Through experiments, they learned how to alter their concoction's properties and make beautiful, fragrant soaps for trade. And so soap making developed into a craft. And now we have chemical knowledge that helps us do things like prevent soap scum buildup and study the structure of oil paint and its chemical changes.
And while learning chemistry and chemical history might make these transformations seem less like magic, it doesn't make them any less amazing. All right, tiny show and tell. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I am happy to go first this time, Deboki, if you'd like.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. This is the most me story ever.
I'm so excited. I almost want to predict, but just go for it.
All right, so I'm going to tell you about how a piece of moss helped expose a cemetery scandal.
I was going to assume crime. I feel like this has to go in the direction of crime.
It's not just crime, it's dead bodies.
Sorry, I did not mean to denigrate your brand like that, to reduce it to crime.
Right. Don't do it again, Deboki. Okay. So this happened in Illinois. In 2009, workers were accused of digging up graves and then reselling the emptied burial plots and dumping the bodies elsewhere.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah. So I will say that I think this is just such a cool potential episode idea. So I'm not going to go into all of it because I want to do a super deep dive later, potentially.
Right, yeah.
I mean, if you listen to this and you think, yes, I want to hear more about this. I want you to interview the scientists. I want to know everything. Please email us because I'm truly debating whether or not I should make this an episode. Okay.
You seem inspired.
I feel inspired, Deboki. Okay, so what happened was this happened in 2009. The case didn't go to trial until 2015. But when it did, there was a tiny clump of moss that made a big difference in the trial. And so now a study, even though, this was done a decade ago, there's a study that was finally published in the Journal of Forensic Sciences Research that has a detailed scientific account of the investigation and how the moss actually showed that this crime did take place. So the tiny bit of moss was actually found under the soil alongside a bunch of these human remains that had possibly been dug up and reburied. And that's what they were trying to figure out. And so what they found was that this moss, scientists were able to identify what species of moss this was, which is pretty fun, and then look at the moss in the area where these remains were found versus the moss in the supposed graves that had been dug up. And what they found was that it actually matched the area that they were dug up from.
Yeah.
And then also they wanted to figure out when these bodies were dug up. Because, right, if someone's being accused of this, they could say, no, this happened before I started here. This happened a long time ago. So you need to figure out how long ago this happened. And again, the moss was very helpful because you can actually analyze chlorophyll content to estimate its age. And what they were able to then do, what the scientists were then able to do, is prove that the remains had been moved very recently. And
Oh
so,
my God.
of course, there was additional evidence, right? But like these two pieces of science evidence helped secure convictions for this case. And so I started obviously looking into this crime. And apparently, staff at this cemetery were digging up graves over like a pretty short window of time, but it was over 200 graves.
Oh my God.
And they were dumping the remains and then they were reselling these plots to make money. So I looked into this a little bit more and it was pretty extensive. Like some places will, in the press release that I read, it said around 200 bodies that
Oh
had
my
actually
God.
like graves that had been desecrated. And then the bodies were just like stacked places. Some of course were reburied in a random spot or, which is how they got that little piece of moss. But yeah, it's a story of like incredible forensic science work.
Yeah.
And apparently also was a super famous cemetery, which is also like,
Oh.
it's the cemetery that has Emmett Till at
Oh,
it.
wow.
Yeah. So I'm glad that science was able to provide some answers and maybe deter people from trying to do this in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. The moss will catch you.
The moss will turn you in.
Well, this is not like really that related, but I also have a story about like plants. Like
I love
just
that.
plants. Plants doing things and making things kind of complicated. In this case, it's making things complicated for both conservationists and lemurs.
Oh, I love a lemur.
Yeah, so you're going to feel equally conflicted about this story as I do.
Ugh.
So I'm going to talk about the strawberry guava, which sounds like delicious. I haven't had one, but it sounds really good.
I want like a strawberry guava tea.
Yeah, right?
You're going to tell me that it's actually deadly.
Well, okay. So the problem is that according to the International Union for Conservation of Nature, it's one of the 100 worst invasive species.
Ugh.
It is originally from Brazil, but it has spread to plenty of other continents, including to Africa. And it has landed on Madagascar, where people have been trying to restore forests after significant deforestation. And this is also tough because Madagascar is home to lemurs, which are endangered, and they seem to love these strawberry guavas. There have been studies finding that they will go to these areas that have the guavas. They will just thrive on them, and they also, because they're eating them, they're spreading their seeds around.
Just let them have it. Just let them have it. All the conservationists or people who actually know anything about how our ecosystem works are like, no.
Yeah. No, so that's what this is about. There's a recent study, I think it was published in January, looking at the environmental impact of the strawberry guava, and it's not great. So they looked at, I think, at some of these areas in Madagascar and basically found sure, there were some native seedlings that could sprout in areas that had been invaded by the guava, but they couldn't survive. It also lowered the diversity of flying and ground-dwelling insects in the area. They didn't look at mammals in this study, but it does lower, your diversity of insects, which is,
not good.
You need your bugs.
Yeah.
There's also less carbon and nitrogen in the soil. And so it's just leading to all of these sticky questions. So what does it mean? I don't know. I think it's not clear. It's complicated. But that's part of what I found really interesting about this, that it's really hard to parse in this way.
Yeah.
And it's just about how complicated ecosystems are and how that makes conservation decisions really difficult. So
Yeah, I guess I take it back.
I know, it's hard.
Sounds delicious. I love a lemur, but
Yeah,
no, it sounds like actually a big problem.
Yeah.
But if we can tear up all the extra plants and use them for something delicious,
right.
maybe we can all benefit.
I know. Yeah, I think it's just so hard to figure out. Do you balance trying to help these endangered species just thrive in their way, or how do you balance an ecosystem? Don't know.
I'm looking up
The
strawberry guava. Oh, wow. They really just look like little guavas. To be honest, I guess they have the essence of strawberry. I was going to say they look like radishes or actually they look like pomegranates on the outside to me.
they do.
And then the inside looks like a guava, but apparently they smell or taste like strawberry.
Yeah.
I'm not on strawberry guava's side, but I do want to try one.
I know, yeah. It's like now that I've seen it, I'm really curious about what it tastes like.
Yeah, me too.
And also like horrified at the idea that they would like invade and take over.
Well, bummer.
Plants.
Today is a story about one plant that was really helping us out, and another plant that's really challenging our ecosystem, or Madagascar's ecosystem. They contain multitudes.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Tiny Matters, a podcast brought to you by the American Chemical Society and produced by Multitude. This week's script was written by Anne Hilden and edited by me, by Michael David, and by Sam, who is our exec producer. It was fact-checked by Michelle Boucher. Our audio engineer is Misha Stanton. The Tiny Matters theme is by Michael Simonelli and the Charts and Leisure team.
Thanks so much to Christine Konkel, Seth Rasmussen, Jen Bayline, and Ewan Hermans for joining us. We'll see you next time.